this and that, and what the fuck else, episode 126. In this episode I will be talking a bit about the Donbass, the EU, the green stuff, and New Zealand, and there is some interesting information about Russia, the UK, and the USA. And what the fuck, that will just make you frown. It was yesterday was a rough day here at my place, and I didn't get the opportunity. That was on Friday. I didn't get the opportunity to do a news snippet, but I did publish the video about the Republic should break up. Getting some interesting remarks and responses on that. And on Friday night I did a live show on lovinglifetv.com, and I was talking about UPSs and how I manage my life around the load shedding. And this evening I watched the news on Cakenet, and there was an insert about a spot there in KwaZulu-Natal where the citizens are complaining like hell. The children are drowning on their way to school because they have to cross a river and there's no bridge, and they have to go for miles through the bush. It's full of snakes, and they were complaining that they don't have a clinic. And I watched them as they told their stories, and I thought to myself, but that is what you have because of the way that you are voting, and that's it. And then you hear that officials, they don't want to make promises because then they will be seen as people that breaks promises. Then I saw an insert about Durban, about the houses in the flood, same story about the promises. And then I saw a story about Mpangeni with that hospital there, and the fact that the hospital theatre had to be closed because the air conditioning is not functioning, and how the patients are suffering, and they have to send patients away, and I just shook my head. There was a time when I had empathy with it, and I'm sorry to say, call me whatever you like, I feel absolutely fuck all for their misery. They brought that onto themselves. But let's leave that. I'm going to start today, this episode, again with a photograph, and you will be surprised about this photograph. And I'm going to tell you a few things that you must look for. This is typically a photograph that will be entered in a category for glamour, and with a push it can go into boudoir. But what I want to talk about is a mistake that many photographers make when they do this type of photography. First, look at her hand. See the amputation line there? We call it amputation. Amputation through the wrist. That is a no-no. You don't do that. You don't cut the hand in the wrist. And look further up onto the right of the image on a foot, exactly same mistake again. Amputation through the ankle. So if this shot was entered in a salon and I had to judge it, it will get about a 6 from me. And if you look at the shot is well lit, the lighting is good, composition is not bad, but things are natural. Her head is not resting on anything, she's holding it. And I can guarantee you she won't hold that pose for 10 minutes. That's one of the tests that you have to look at when you look at models. Can she hold that pose? She won't be able to hold that pose. You can see the neck is taking strain and it's a little bit unnatural. But the biggest no-nos is the amputations. And then we get to the pestilence, and every day that goes by, it becomes more and more bizarre. There's no other words for it, just bizarre. And then this guy posted this on Twitter. The truth is, the snake bite are accelerating, and you can read that yourself. And the guy says, I have the proof, but nobody from the CDC will return my phone calls. I don't know what to say about this. The fact of the matter is, things went wrong and pear-shaped on this whole campaign. And now there's a lot of people ducking out of their positions that they had because they can see the day of reckoning is coming. I feel extremely sorry for the guys that were misled, but then again, they had a choice. They had access to the same information that I had, and they made a choice. And then we get to the Donbass, and this is specifically for that Nazi stalker of mine. He must look at this report, and then he must feel very good and get himself another drink, because his team has once again had a great success. Ukrainian forces shelled a hospital in Lugansk, 14 dead. The Novodayar hospital was reportedly hit by the armed forces of Ukraine using a HIMARS. As a result, 14 people were killed and 24 were injured. The building is almost completely destroyed. My question is, a hospital? Why? Next question, why is the media not the Western media not reporting on that? And then for my Zazi stalker, you can feel happy tonight. And then we get to this interesting piece. The Brazilian President Luiz Inácio da Silva rejected the German government's request for ammunition for the Leopard tanks. This was reported by Folha de Sao Paulo. The article says that the head of the country vetoed the supply of ammunition for tanks in Ukraine from Brazil in order to preserve neutrality and not to provoke the Russians. Wise decision. And then we get to the energy thing, and this is something interesting, and you must just take note of it. Every time you hear the term fossil fuel on the TV, radio, news, etc., you're being lied to. In 1892, at the Geneva Convention, the smartest man in the oil industry, J.D. Rockefeller, paid scientists to call oil a fossil fuel to induce the idea of scarcity in order to set a world price for oil. The truth is that oil is actually the second most prevalent liquid on earth, next to water, and regenerates within the earth faster than it can ever be depleted. And I have mentioned it in a previous Skidmark. I had a discussion with my host in Kuwait, and they said exactly the same thing about the oil not being a fossil fuel. And then we get to the EU, and this is from the Croatian president. Was very surprised by German Foreign Minister Baerbock's statement that Europe is at war with Russia, and he hastened to deny it. I did not know that. Maybe Germany is at war with Russia again. Then good luck to them. Maybe it will turn out better than it did 70 years ago. Milanovic said sneeringly. He also sees no connection between the peace in Ukraine and the supply of tanks and weapons to Kiev. There's more and more voices coming up about this thing. The West has gone insane. They basically committed economic suicide, and they are being disarmed at a hell of a tempo. And the tragedy that you must keep in mind here, once that war stops in Ukraine, there's absolutely no chance that Europe will go back to normal. There's no way they will again have the benefit of the cheap Russian energy. Never. It's gone forever. So the European economy is screwed forever. And they did it to themselves. Then we get to this. Debt trap myth. African governments owe 3 times more debt to private Western lenders than China and are charged double the interest rate. New research based on the World Bank data by UK's finds this has a huge implications for debt relief. And this was because there was a thing promoted by the Western media, and it was obviously planted by the US, and that is that China is a debt trap for Africa. The reality is this: on average, if you take the total debt of the countries in Africa, 34% is to China. And here's the big kicker: that 34% is at 2.5% interest, and the 66% to the West is at 5 to 7%. And here's another one. Every year, it's part of their national budget, China writes off African debt. They write off a percentage of the African debt, plus routinely they will write off the interest. The West don't do that. But the West is in deep shit, let's not forget that. Their economies are in deep shit. The bulk of the raw materials belongs to the non-West. And the days of the West pillage and stealing is over. So they've got a problem. And then we get to this, and my blood boiled. In South Africa, it's already happening. Wildlife are not livestock. What the fuck is this thing talking about? We have got so many game ranchers that are breeding wildlife for the meat market. And he makes a stupid statement like that. And I replied to him, fucking bleeding hearts. Farmers breed game for the market. How is it different from sheep or cattle or chickens? Fuck off and go vegan if you don't like it. And sorry for my harsh words, but that's exactly my sentiment. And then we get to this green shit. Crickets to be allowed as food in the EU. Fancy some defatted and powder house crickets at your next dinner party. Of course, you don't because you're not mental. However, those wacky, fun-loving types over in the EU have different ideas. Starting Tuesday, manufacturers will be giving the all clear to stuff your favorite cereal bars, biscuits, pizza pasta, and much more with powdered cricket. Don't worry, though, because all suitable crickets must undergo a 24-hour fasting period to discard their bowel content, because that's the part we have a problem with. And all food containing Jiminy and his friends must have an appropriate label. We suggest the label, warning, not suitable for vegans or non-vegans. What shit is this? This is the WEF plan. We will eat insects and they will eat steak. This is what they are planning. And look, they're passing this in the EU. Those EU, it looks to me like those people in charge in the EU are all mental cases. And then Rebel News published this image. European Union begins adding buck additives to food. Just look at that. Would you like a burger like that? I will not. And then we get to New Zealand, and it seems to me they had some rain. Those guys are swimming. Look at this. Severe flooding sparks state of emergency. State of emergency has been declared in the New Zealand capital Auckland after horrific flooding inundated the city. The airport has been flooded and temporarily closed down, according to local media. And then there's more. Here you can see some cuts from videos. New Zealand, the largest city in New Zealand, was hit by a heavy downpour. A state of emergency has been declared in New Zealand after recording its wettest 24 hours on record, leading to sudden widespread flooding. Here are some pictures, look at that. That's a lot of water. And then there, look at that street. Gee, I'm almost up to the car windows. And this image I'm just putting in, they should actually pay the electricians a bonus. Look, that traffic light is still working. And then we get to Russia, and this is a historical event. On this day in 1944, Leningrad, USSR, was liberated from German blockade. By the time the city was dying from bombing, shelling and starvation. But even then, there were plays and musical performances. 200 enterprises continued to work, producing shells, mines, mortars, planes and tanks for the front. When the Soviet soldiers entered Leningrad, there were no more than 800,000 inhabitants left of the 3 million pre-war population. That was a horrible thing. And I wonder who in the fucking West thought that Russia is going to fold their arms and just watch while the West plans something like this again for Russia. And listen to this. And this is for the Zazi supporters. This is what the Zazis did to Leningrad. The Germans dropped more than 100,000 bombs and over 150,000 artillery shells into that city. The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days. There is no example in history where such a large sister city withstood such terrible blockade. On January 27, 1944, the people of Leningrad celebrated the lifting of the siege. There was a salute from 324 guns. Up to 1.5 million people died from hunger and bombing during the blockade. Supplies under the shelling were coming across Lake Ladoga. The ice road was called the Road of Life. And then I'm asking myself this. Does the Germans really think it is a clever plan to send German tanks to Ukraine and then those German tanks land on Russian soil? What will the Russian people think of that? Think about it. And then we get to the UK. UK is in deep shit. It's only a matter of time and numbers. Muslim patrol in Leicester. Look at that. Muslim patrol. Sharia law. But I've said it many times, the UK is stuffed. And some more hilarious news from the UK. London is ready to transfer fighter jets to the AFU, but only on one condition. The UK is ready to transfer military jets to Kiev, but only if the Russian army withdraws from the territory of Ukraine. This was reported to the British journalists by sources in the Royal Air Force. Ukraine may need the fighters to patrol the airspace, but they will be transferred to Kiev only after the Russian military leaves the territory of the country. As of today, any talk about possible transfers of the British fighters to Kiev can and will be carried out only under such conditions, the British newspaper The Daily Telegraph reported. These guys in London are using too much of that white stuff that Bojo brought back from Kiev. And look at the conditions. They don't want to give the aeroplanes, that's why they put that condition. So the headline is, London ready to transfer fighter jets, but then the small print says only if the Russians withdraw. And then we get to the Ukraine. And this is very sobering. According to rumors, the losses of the armed forces of Ukraine in accordance with the data transmitted by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Zaluzny, to the Pentagon amount to 232,000 killed. According to the private company Stratfor Forecasting, Ukraine's losses exceeded 305,000 killed. Think about that. Ukraine is done. This is all the young, productive men. This is the future of the Ukraine, and they're gone. The West is going to pay for what they did there. And then we get this from the US, and this woman, this Victoria Newland, she was the one that orchestrated the coup. And there's a tape of her where her counterpart, the guy on the other side of the line, asked her, what about the EU? And she said, fuck the EU. US diplomat Victoria Newland celebrated the bombing of Nord Stream 2 pipeline. She said, Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is, very gratified to know that the Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. Look at that. They are fucking bragging about the fact that they have cut the energy supply to Germany off. And they brag about it. These people are evil. And then we get to more shit from the US. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned South African officials about the consequences of violating US sanctions that were imposed on Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. Now she can take a flying fucking dive out of her airplane window over the Atlantic Ocean. Clearly, it is the US sanctions against Russia. We've got nothing to do with that. We don't need to pay any attention to that. But they're intimidating our weak leadership. And more from this woman. I almost used that ugly word. Yellen touts anti-Russia sanctions on Africa trip. The US Treasury Secretary discussed economic sanctions against Russia in every stop of her tour, which is aimed at deepening economic bonds with the continent and warding off the increasing domination of Chinese trade in the region. The US is in the middle of discussions about the EU proposed $100 barrel price cap on Russian oil, and she was encouraged we will be able to come to an agreement by February 5. The reality here is the African states don't want any part of the West anymore. They see the West as colonizers, and they see Russia and China as opponents of the colonizers. The West is done in Africa. And some stupid guy said to me on Twitter, yeah, but America is our second biggest trading partner. I've got no issue with that. But the guys that are doing that, the farmers and the industries that are participating in that trade, better turn their eyes east. Those markets are going to evaporate. Then I get to this disturbing cock about South Africa. Once again, Herman Mashava's party showed its true colors. The DA mayor was ousted in that coalition, and a little lighty from the EFF is now the mayor of Johannesburg. What does that guy know about managing a city? Can he manage a spaza? Has he managed any business in his life? Has he managed anything successful? Has he built anything successful? The answer is nothing. He's in there because of a coalition between the ANC and the EFF, and the fact that Mashava's party ditched the coalition. But now Joburg will pay. The ratepayers in Joburg will pay. The citizens of Joburg will pay. Let that be a lesson to them when the next time the polls come up. And then we get to that what a fuck moment, and I'm just going to show you the image and you can look at it yourself. And somebody posted on Twitter, how is it possible that lean and slim John Steenhuisen got to this? My opinion, that fucking big fat salaries that they get, which is maybe 80% too much. They need an 80% pay cut for all the parliamentarians. They must get very close to the minimum wage. Then you won't see fat people like this in our benches. And on that dick note, please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you.